in contrast to microbes could also get in there, and I think we all know the process of making gas by microbes. They can do the same, but that's at a much lower temperature. Any other questions? Yes.
How much interaction is there between your department and your division at the university and the state? And I'm thinking particularly, I'm looking at the Collingwood drilling and the Yellow Dog plants.
It depends upon the field. As I said, I mean, we are just retiring one of our ore geologists, and in that time there was clearly a lot of interaction both with industry, and periodically it's the legislatures usually sort of ask us to, if there's a problem or to look into something. I mean, when I was looking at this salt mine, in fact, one of the legislative bodies came up here and said, here's a question we've got, we want to test to see whether or not it's right. Do you have any diagnostic tests that could tell us whether or not this water came from groundwater or was it derived from diesel fumes, which produce water as well? But so whenever we're called upon, we interact. Do we, I don't know, do we lobby? No.
But I guess I would say that are you more through the dean or through public policy, are you more interactive in letting, say, the folks in Lansing, and I'm thinking about not necessarily the legislators, but the departmental people, know that you're available, that there's expertise not only at the University of Michigan, but
at MSU, at all of our state universities, there are great people in water in Western Michigan and in Lansing. I mean, I would say we're always available. Do we advertise that? I know that our university actually knows our specialties, and when called upon, I sometimes get calls from people to asking questions. Specialized procedures, again, we do when we recognize a problem. Do we get involved with, on a more general sense, the questions that, or the problems that affect the state? Yes. I mean, we have a number of sort of subgroupings in the university. For example, the hydrofracking issue. We've had meetings with the Graham Institute of Sustainability where we're trying to bring together lawyers, which will have to be dealing with some contamination if it happens, with engineers who can help us understand the details of how things are done, and then the geologists understand what I call the subsurface architecture of where these beds go and their characteristics. So yeah, we're certainly available. I wouldn't say that there's a free flow. We're more like a shale. We need to be fracked occasionally to get that free flow of information between resources and where it's needed. But I know that I know of none of my colleagues that would in any way be hesitant. I have asked to try to contribute, both in scientific questions or whatever. But yes.
I've gotten the impression that Pennsylvania is marching forward with fracking despite communications to the contrary. Is that what you're saying?
They basically have. I do know that the National Science Foundation, in a very unusual way, because they normally don't simply give money for what we might call baseline studies, but they in fact awarded University of Pennsylvania or Penn State a fair bit of money to actually go out and find out, measure well water across the state for organic contaminants, natural levels of methane. So they are worried about it. The National Science Foundation is, as a state legislature, they have to be, but I don't know what they're doing about it. I mean, you have to admit it's tempting. I mean, I don't know what the revenue returns are. I mean, I think we're in good shape here in Michigan because we've been poor for such a long time. We've been in a depression such a long time. We've learned how to work well with those fiscal constraints, and we're getting better, which is wonderful. But I think Pennsylvania is actually, on the low end now, and so they're seeing revenues coming in. I don't know whether or not I shouldn't even say that because I'll probably have some Pennsylvania person write me a bad letter. But I mean, clearly they are. It's a great potential. There are 90,000 wells been put in Pennsylvania, as I understand. Yeah, Sal.
The Department of Environmental Protection in Pennsylvania has taken some pretty dramatic steps to beef up their regulations. The problems they've had were with well construction and with disposal of this flowback water. And they have addressed those now through beefed up regulations, so they're coming to grips with the issues.
Yeah, see, that was my impression. The EPA puts out sort of the standard, if everything's wonderful, this is sort of the guidelines. But it's up to individual states to understand the uniqueness of their water system, of the stratigraphy, the geology, of where they're working, to actually set regulations that will ensure the quality of drinking water and of the environment. And so, I mean, that's where DEQ's really needs to, again, be working with the legislatures to make sure that everything's cool, that everything's done.
Kind of catching up to somewhere close to where we are.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, one of the real problems is the way they were getting rid of the wastewater to begin with. I mean, that's how some of the radioactivity problems really became aware, and that was being put through waste treatment plants and then pumped in the water, and then goes down the stream, and the next city picks it up. It's like Ypsilanti getting all of Ann Arbor's wastewater. So I think the regulatory part has to really depend upon the science parts, which is coming from your universities when you ask us, and also your state people are good. I mean, they do work for our environment, and I trust that. Okay. Are there any other questions? Yeah.
With this wastewater, you said that in Michigan right now, we require them to be basically put into storage tanks. Can that wastewater ever be rendered neutral?
I think how we were talking about earlier, right now they're doing deep injections into a couple of geologic formations, but so they never allow it to be put in open ponds that have the potential of leaking into the surface.
So it can't ever be rendered
Well, you can have
neutral.
a bad tank, but hopefully they can fix it.
I mean, the water can never...
I don't think you can easily. It's so salty. It's got very high levels of bromine in it in many cases, and disseminated, low level, in some cases hundreds of times what we would accept for any other water in terms of radioactivity. It's better, they should be treated as hazardous fluids.
So the
Okay.
only options are you
Yeah.
store it forever,
Right.
or you find...
Yeah, typically drilling waters, because they're circulating mud down, and they've got to have water. That's the 80,000 gallons of water. That water is not seeing the same, well, first of all, they don't have all of the additives that they put into the fracking fluid. And the volumes are so much less. Those traditionally have been classified as much less sort of contaminated, and those could be put into, not in the super hazardous injection well systems, but I think now the hydrofracking fluids need to be dealt with as a hazardous fluid, okay? And as long as Michigan is, and you have to do it, the legislature and DEQ have to make that policy that we think these should not be disposed as sort of a slightly contaminated water. They need to be placed into the deep basin in units that are not prone to cross-formational contamination of other units. Okay, is that a fair assessment now? Okay.
We'd like to encourage recycling of it, reuse for other hydraulic fracturing
Well,
jobs.
that's what I was
But
wondering,
the
can
problem
it be
is,
reused?
you have to store it somewhere in the meantime.
5
You gotta have
million
huge volume of
Per well.
storage
And
capacity.
then you have
Well.
to schlep it to the next...
And the spacing of these wells is probably on the order of about 1 every 160 acres, as I understand, is sort of the typical spacing there. So 1 every 160 acres to maximize production, which means you'd have 4 in a square mile.
Actually, it's been 1 per square mile.
Or down to 1 per
So
square
far.
mile.
They're voluntarily making bigger units because those long horizontal holes will drain pretty size.
Oh yeah, because if you're going 6,000 feet laterally on those, and from a single platform, you can think about it as a starburst beneath. So they could, depending upon the density, what they want to do is get enough fracture density under there so that they can essentially mine everything underneath that square mile. But some of the numbers I was looking at earlier was a higher density, but it also depends upon what rock unit they have to figure it out. Yeah.
Where are they getting water from? Are they depleting the water table for the farmers or whoever might be in the immediate area?
Well, it is surface water. They need fresh water. They can't take deep salty water because that is problems in terms of corrosion, interactability with the additives they put in. So it is coming out of surface waters. Now, again, Michigan's sort of an interesting state because, I mean, we are in a basin. Water does leave it, and some water comes in, obviously. But much of our drinking water, at least our groundwater, we're really like a porous sieve, a big sandbox, and the water comes in. That's why we don't have big rivers that are surface flow fed, but they're mainly groundwater fed. So we've got a lot of groundwater, and I assume that we're just using groundwater.
Right.
If you suck too much out, in fact, if you think about it, there is an equilibrium between lake levels and groundwater. Eventually, the groundwater actually extends below the lake levels. If you're really pulling a lot of water and you're near the shore, it's connected to the Great Lakes, so we're pulling it out of the Great Lakes. Okay? Yeah, but you know, the real concern I have, I feel pretty fortunate in that I have a well, and I live in an area that's not heavily farmed, no industry around me. I do have to worry about atmospheric deposition of mercury. All of us do. But my water is essentially really clean and untreated. I would say that most cities, in fact, about 85% of Ann Arbor's water, last time I looked at it, was derived from Huron River. And that's classified as good water, not excellent, okay? And so the problem is, I mean, we can say we've got a lot of water, but it's not, we still have to worry about contamination of it, okay? And I think, you know, the policies that are made in terms of waste disposal and everything we can do in terms of, you know, effluent and so forth, habitational pollution, what do we do with stormwater, all of that helps remediate things that have been occurring without our knowledge in the past. So I wouldn't say our water is just super good. It's good. I mean, it's better than a lot of places in the country, and we've got a lot more of it. But the Great Lakes, again, I'm not pregnant. I can eat it because I'm an adult male beyond the reproductive age. Okay, any questions? Well, I want to thank all of you. I learned a lot here today as well.
And on behalf of the Wolverine Caucus, we would like to thank you, Professor Lohmann, and present you this gold pin, the Wolverine.
Oh, thank you very
Wolverine
much.
Caucus pin.
Real gold, that's special gold.
14 karat.
Great.
And I know that some of you will continue to have questions about this very, very important topic, so please feel free to let us know, and we will keep you in touch with Professor Lohmann. I wanted to also thank those on staff with Representative Matt Hookey, that's Joy Brewer, and Ashley Ligon is here from Representative Rick Olson's office. Katie Carey, Sarah Shilio, and John Ida from Representative Jeff Irwin's office. And of course, again, thank those legislators who joined us today. We hope that you will join us on March 14th, when our next topic will be invasive species and the Great Lakes. So until then, have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Thank you again for joining us. Have a good day.
I'm not on it's a sulfide deposit. It's actually nickel deposit. Almost everywhere else. We've been to the old mines that are very small. Great program. I think the estimate, I mean, I've read this myself online. They estimate a lot of copper, but the price of nickel and the associated rarer. Well, there's no more grant actually. We tried to write here. James, it's a really quick question. Actually, it's fine.
Oh, yeah.
No, because what you really need is think about the geology, where there's reasonable calculation. Geothermal gradient there may be 100 feet per 1,000 feet. There you have the potential of putting a comfortable run down.
As far as the disposal of are they continuing?
They clearly are pushing out other waters that are in there. The real question is, state geologists is actually, they monitor this, so they're in pretty good shape. But there are a number of formations that have a lot of